This week on the podcast, we have a different guest. Rather than a nutritionist or a natural health professional, I'm bringing on my amazing boyfriend, Ryan Magic, the Ryan Magic, to share his experience through his... How many years have you been in the coaching industry, babe?
I've been in this space since I was 19, so 12 years.
Wow. Yeah. So he has extensive experience in the coaching industry. Much of that was actually in business coaching and mentoring. And he's now moved into fulfillment coaching and really supporting people in living from their heart and not from their head. And that's a very brief summary of what he does. He does some incredible things, which we'll dive into in this episode. But I thought it would be really amazing to have Ryan here to share his experience and expertise in business and in helping other people grow their businesses. So thank you for being here, Ryan.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Let's get into it by talking about what actually got you into the coaching space and what got you interested in coaching coaches for that time where you did.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me on, babe. Really appreciate that. And listeners, great to be here. So I had a tough upbringing with two well-meaning parents that had issues with mental health and drug abuse, and I therefore came out of my childhood very anxious and nervous. Had a really tough time during my high school years, and I got into personal development at 16 through this really wild gift from God, where I essentially had a mentor from the golf club, because I used to play golf as an outlet in my teenage years, and he bought me an iPod. He challenged me to shoot this certain score on this day and during this competition, and I shot it, and then he bought me an iPod for my birthday, and he loaded a bunch of Tony Robbins tapes on there, he's like the OG, he's like the world's biggest coach. And then after using personal development to transcend the possibility that I thought I had, I was very limited. I was bullied a lot in high school, and I didn't think that I could really create much in the world. And then off the back end of personal development, I started to challenge possibility and build some things. And I had in the back of my mind that I'd love to get into coaching, but I thought it was such a long-term thing. And then when I kind of reflected at one point, I did this activity. My really close friend at the time, his parents were into personal development, and they went to a seminar, and an activity they did at the seminar was to write out their own eulogy. And then they told him about it, he told me about it, and we did the activity together. And then when I wrote out my own eulogy, I was like, holy crap, I could die in a year's time from now. And if I didn't launch straight into my deepest dream and passion, and pretty much just my dream of being a speaker and a coach, then I might regret it if I pass away before I get the chance to do that. So I jumped straight into coaching at that point.
And what did that look like?
It looked like so what I did to start was, first thing, I felt, because I'd had the idea for a while, but I didn't have the motivation to actually get it off the ground. I started by hiring a really premium mentor. I joined like a mastermind program that was $50,000. And at that point, when I was starting out, it was a pretty big deal. And so, because I had to shut down my previous business, which was like a web design agency and a digital marketing agency. And I really put myself in a poor financial situation overnight by shutting that down, because I had to refund clients and cut my cash flow, and it was costly. And so I pretty much took everything that I had. I borrowed some money for the deposit, which is a $5,000 deposit for this program, and then had $1,000 coming out of my account every single week. And it was like, welcome to the coaching space. Now you're going to somehow get money for it. But that being backed into a corner for me was really effective, because it made it a must instead of like a future nice to have. Like, I'll transition over the next few years. But at that point, because I was just thrown into the deep end, I had to sink or swim. And I swam by making a decision after joining this program, having this money coming out of my account. Within 3 days, I was running my first seminar, and I had 30 to 40 people there. And I sold from stage. Like it was so scary. And it was so scary to even do the talk to begin with, because I wasn't practiced with public speaking at that point.
Yeah.
And then I got my first $1,000 sales selling from stage at that first event. And then I was like, I'm going to keep doing this every single week until I break through in a big way. And yeah, I got a really big breakthrough. I made my first $1 million in the first 10 months of that business in sales. And then I just went from there.
I feel like there's a lot we can unpack from that. The first thing I want to ask you about is when you shut down your web design business to go all in on the coaching and sign up with that mentor, was the reason you shut down that business so that you could just focus on coaching and do what you truly wanted to do deep down?
Yeah, it was that doubling down, that same idea of putting myself into a corner and making it a must, because I knew that if I had the reliance of being able to make money by, because the way that I got clients with my web design business, it was so easy. And it was my cash cow. That was where I was relying on cash flow to come through. And it was very easy to get clients for that. And so I knew that if I had that there and the coaching wasn't going well, I would just keep relying on the money from the digital agency and not pull my finger out and take the leap into running seminars and doing what I had to do to make the new business work.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Would you say that act of like burning the bridge or burning like your plan B and only having like to go all in on that is part of the reason you were able to succeed so quickly?
Definitely for me. I've got a different perspective now of what I recommend for other people. I feel like that can work if it feels really aligned and exciting to do so. And like, you know yourself and you know that you do well under pressure. But if you don't do well under pressure and you kind of go into freeze and can't deal with that, the weight of that, then it may not be as effective for you. I think taking a while to transition to make something work can be a really beautiful and mature journey. And I think everyone's personalities are so different. Everyone's paths are so different. And it's important to honor who you are and the way that your journey looks. And I feel like that's where the magic unfolds.
Yeah, absolutely. We do see a lot, and we're bombarded a lot with lots of people online these days saying, quit your 9 to 5, go all in on this. You'll make 6 figures in no time. Like, what's your opinion on that? Obviously, you're saying that transition can be healthy. Do you want to speak a little bit more to that? Because I think this is really important, and it's really beneficial to stop and get off that hype train and be like, actually, we can do this in a more grounded, settled way, rather than putting ourselves into survival and then freaking out when we don't have the income coming in and we're trying to pay our bills.
Yeah. I think going a little bit bigger picture with the same concept, that in the world of personal growth and possibility and pursuing our dreams and personal development, there's an idea of like most people that get into this space of personal growth oftentimes do it from a place of insecurity. And that's what I noticed within myself. That's what my whole journey since becoming successful as a coach, because that I succeeded when I was 22 years old was when I made my first $1 million, and I'm 31 now. So the last 9 years has been a rise of my ego and building lots of financial success, and then realizing that I built all that success from a place of trying to prove myself. And then I had to learn to love myself for who I was without the success. I actually shut down the business empire that I built to learn to become a fulfillionaire. We were just talking about this, to actually become fulfilled and to love myself unconditionally.
Yeah.
So that's not really, people in the personal development space often come from that place of insecurity without being aware of that. And because most people that come into this space lack a lot of unconditional self-esteem, I definitely did, and I know a lot of people did. That's not a dig. That's beautiful to celebrate and see your own sensitivity or fragility. But it's true for most people. Even the people that look the toughest and have all these cool looking Instagram feeds are usually building that brand on a lot of insecurity. And so the reason I'm pre-framing this is because when we have a base of insecurity coming into our journey of business growth, then oftentimes we outsource our decision-making, we outsource our confidence to the people that we look up to, like even people would listen to this podcast, maybe somebody comes on with lots of certainty about the way that they did it, and they preach that message with lots of certainty.
Yeah.
And then someone listening could presuppose that's the way. Oh, I was doing it wrong. I need to do it like this unless I take a big leap of faith. But someone could come on saying the opposite and saying, taking a leap of faith is immature and it's important to transition. Both of these are intellectual ideas. They're like in Vedic wisdom, which is what I've done a lot of study around, which is like ancient yogic wisdom. They have this philosophy that, and this understanding that the intellect, which is kind of like our brain in a way, they refer to that aspect of our consciousness as the historian. They say it's beneficial to look backwards, but when you're moving forward, instead of using our intellect, we need to use our intuition, because our intuition has the capacity to meet the present moment with what's most needed and what's most relevant right now. Whereas because most of the personal development space is leveraging a bunch of people that don't feel powerful in who they are, and they're looking for other people to guide them. Tony Robbins, what's Tony Robbins? Well, the quote, Tony Robbins says that you go big or go home, or whatever. He doesn't actually say that, but let's just say that he said that.
Proximity is power.
Proximity is power. So someone might listen into that and go, okay, cool. Or like your environment's made of the five people around you determine how successful you're going to be. And then you might go out there and start changing your close friendship groups. And there could be really amazing friends that aren't as successful, and people hear that and they take it as an absolute principle, an intellectual idea, something that was based on like an already solidified idea that is always right, instead of being intellectual and listening to the extreme messages that thought leaders in the personal development space have. I'm gonna always be the master of my own decision making, and no matter what anyone else says, I'm gonna filter it through what feels right for me, through my own knowing and needs and what's most needed for me right now. And the word that I use to describe that is discernment. I feel like discernment is like the intersection point between intellect and intuition. It's okay, cool. I'm going to listen to all the feedback from other people, and sure, Tony Robbins said that, and like Tony Robbins says, raise your standards to change your life, and Eckhart Tolle says, embrace the moment. And I'm going to take both of those in, and then I'm going to go, what's most relevant for me right now? And so I think that if you're listening to this, knowing yourself and knowing that when you make a decision and lock it in, if you can own that, that's where your power is. Because it doesn't matter whether you straight away go into some big leap of faith or you transition over 5 years, because life isn't about how successful you become. The success of your life, if you look at this amazing book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, that was written by a palliative care nurse that was in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people when they're on their deathbed. She got to hear firsthand encounters of what do people actually regret at the end of their life. And nothing about success is mentioned. What people are regretting is working too hard, not giving themselves permission to be happier, not staying in touch with friends, living a life that other people expected of them versus the one that's having the courage to live the life that's most authentic to them, and giving themselves permission to feel. These are the top 5 regrets of the dying. None of that has anything to do with success. And so when you know yourself and you choose based on what's aligned for you, because you know yourself and you feel really good about your decision, that's where you're in your power. Because that's when you're having a life, you're having the courage to live a life true to you, not of what others people expect of you. If someone expects you to be more successful, success is not what life's about. Fulfillment is about what life is about. And at the end of your life, I'm telling you, you're not going to care, I should have hustled that little bit more. That's not going to come up. You're going to be like, where are the people I care about most? You're going to go, man, I wish I had given myself permission to be happier. The book will tell you those top 5 things are the things, and it's nothing about money or success in there. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we will get back to your progression through your journey. But one thing I do want to touch on is one of the original questions I used to ask people on Nutrition Grad Guide is, what does success mean to you? And is it pretty safe to say that success is fulfillment for you?
Yeah, 100%. And fulfillment, to define fulfillment to me is having the highest consistent quality experience of your life. And So what are people, that there's a kind of an association to the word fulfillment, and it's kind of like feeling good. I think when people think of fulfillment, it's just like, oh, it's that future airy fairy kind of thing. But when I think of it as the highest consistent quality experience of your life, I haven't said what's needed for the highest consistent quality experience of life. And I think a lot of people think that means automatically, oh, well, you don't have to work, you just enjoy the moment. That's not true. What we need in order to be able to have a high consistent quality experience is changing in every moment. I say that you need to give, you need to receive, or you need to grow. They're the three options for what you can do to live an empowering life in each moment. Sometimes giving, which is taking action, going and having difficult conversations, launching your business, doing some marketing, working on your health, all these kind of like giving, it's giving your energy to the world. Sometimes that's needed to have a high consistent quality experience, because if you were just receiving, which is more experience-based, enjoying the moment, hanging out with friends, reading a book on the beach, enjoying the sunshine, traveling and adventuring, walks through nature, all these kind of things, watching a movie. These are also really important parts of life. But if we were just sitting on a beach, enjoying the sunshine, and that's all we did, there's going to get to a point where the consistent quality experience of our life decreases. Because what's aligned, it's like our body will be screaming at us, go be of service, go do something in the world, go be relevant. But if you were just going out and serving all the time and working all the time, and you weren't taking time to receive, to enjoy life, to experience life, that'll be decreasing your experience. Sometimes it doesn't matter how much you give, it doesn't matter how much you receive, there's some kind of internal block that you can transcend with breath work, or by seeing a healer or a coach, or doing some journaling, doing some meditation, some way. Everyone has their own processes. Sometimes there's growth that's calling at you, because you're so stuck that you can't, no matter how much action you take or how much space you take to enjoy life, you still feel stuck. And so fulfillment for me is about, how do you have the highest consistent quality experience of your life? And it can be very, very difficult to use discernment, that word that I mentioned before, which is not just taking on board, oh, someone says that you got to keep going and push and go, or someone says life's just about enjoyment. It doesn't matter what anyone else says. You in the moment have a capacity to feel into what you need to return back into your power, into your fulfillment, and prioritize that. So if you're having a day where you're so overworked and you're like, oh, but it's a Tuesday, I should go into work, that's what I should be doing. Shoulds are very dangerous, because you're outsourcing. Again, you're outsourcing your power. You've taken on board some intellectual, historic thing that someone else told you, and that's what I should do right now. But if it's a Tuesday and you need to receive, and you can't do that because you're feeling guilty, your fulfillment is being blocked. But if you're in your power and you go, well, the purpose of life is fulfillment, I can give, receive, or grow to do that. And today I need to receive. I'm not going into work. And then that day, as long as you give yourself permission and you honor yourself for your own decision-making and your own discernment, then you get to really like receive what you need to receive on that day. But if it's another day where everyone's away on holiday and you know, like your body's screaming at you, just launch that podcast, just do that thing. And you're like, sorry guys, I know you guys are going out and hiking today. I'm actually going to stay back and work. It's being able to honor your own knowing of what you need. That's what fulfillment means to me. So that, and that is what I define as success.
Yeah. So would you say that one of the keys to success, aka fulfillment, would be to know yourself? Because if you don't know yourself, it's really hard to feel fulfilled and therefore succeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, we can get more into ways that we can really deepen our knowledge of ourselves. But we'll
probably go deeper into this on the Shana show.
Yeah.
When we do that episode.
Yeah, definitely. So let's continue your career progression for now. Not career progression, business progression.
Same thing.
Yeah, true.
All good.
So you mentioned that you shut down your web design business. You invested $50,000 into a program that you had to borrow money for, and you had those $1,000 payments coming out every week, and you went all in on coaching. You ran your first seminar, you made your first $1,000 from stage.
Yeah. Where'd
you go from there?
So from there, I built and built and built. And over a 3 to 4 year period, I built that business into a $4 to $5 million a year business. And we had a I started off with a $1,000 program, ended up with a $20,000 program that coaches went into, which was a 12-month program that involved retreats and weekly coaching calls. And I had a bunch of coaching staff that I employed in my business to call our clients for accountability, to get them to take action in their business. And I had all these this intellectual property around how to market effectively through Facebook ads and how to productize their intellectual property, no matter whether they were health coaches. I worked with a lot of health coaches, a lot of personal trainers, but whether they were a spiritual coach, career coach, whatever, helping them come up with a premium, take all their information and be able to sell it for like $3,000 to $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, because I was trying to teach them to crush it financially as a coach.
Yeah.
I disagree. Like, I don't, we'll talk next probably about how to approach things differently. But back then the focus for me was, how do I just crush it financially on the biggest level? And how do I help people free themselves? But I really thought that freedom came from financial freedom first and foremost.
Yeah.
Because then it gave people options. And it wasn't like I had bad intentions. I was teaching people the best that I knew, and I was helping people break through financially. Yeah. But I was very marketing and sales focused. And I think that's a really great thing for the listeners to hear, because I'll tell you what I would recommend if I was to start again, probably soon on this podcast. But back then I was all about marketing and sales.
Yeah.
It's like, get your product together, whatever you're selling, and then just market and sell like crazy to get as many clients as possible, deliver an amazing service, and just get high volume of people through the door. That was the focus then for me.
Yeah, beautiful. And I know that you did change a lot of people's lives through that, like some of our friends even, that their life is completely changed through the teachings and the embodiment that you were able to teach, even though you have continued to evolve and just make it better and better.
Yeah, thank you, babe.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And we had a business product, but the business theory was very simple. It was like, launch Facebook ads, get on the phone, make sales. Like it was just so simple.
Yeah.
And so most of the focus that I had with people was their mindset. And that's what I loved doing the most. I loved working on mindset. And so a lot of people's lives changed. And even though they didn't do the business stuff as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think mindset is such an important piece when it comes to success/fulfillment, because without it, it can be really hard to get out of our own way and put ourselves out there and make the impact that we're here to make, because all of the listeners, nutritionists, naturopaths, natural health professionals, all of us are in this because we want to help people. We're healers. We love to help. And in order to do that, we need to have the right mindset that we can get out of our way and put ourselves out there. So yeah, I think it's a really important one. Let's chat about let's pivot for a moment. What were some of your lessons from that time? So we're going to speak about what you do differently now, but what were some of like your key lessons from having that multi-million-dollar business and then having to shut it down or choosing to shut it down?
In like a personal standpoint, or what did I learn about business when I grew it? Anything
you think will be beneficial for the listeners.
Yeah, okay. I'll speak about a couple of different angles. Like one thing that I learned from that phase is that I leveraged a lot of courage to build that business because I was younger. I wasn't necessarily naturally talented or interested in a lot of the things that created the growth of the business. Meaning like I wasn't a Facebook ads expert, or I wasn't like a sales expert, or I wasn't an expert at helping people write books. Like all I really used was courage to build that business. And I just used common sense. And it was really empowering for me to recognize that there was a lot that's possible when we transcend just the invisible barriers that our parents, our family, society tells us. Because I became like a very powerful person, particularly as an entrepreneur. But just the amount of stories that my family and friends and all the people growing up had told me, teachers in school, just a lot of people were just scared for me going off just the idea of being in business. Just like, oh, being in business that's risky. And just no real, like I learned how much is possible with just the desire, the will to do it. That's it. And the courage. And the whole business pretty much built off just being courageous, having things that I was terrified to do and just doing them anyway. That's the whole success, the whole $10+ million that I made through that business. It was literally just doing a bunch of scary things.
Yeah.
That's it.
And how did you make yourself feel the fear and do it anyway? Because we hear that saying a lot, but like, it's one thing hearing it, it's another thing actually doing the thing. What gave you that courage and that drive to take that action and keep throwing yourself into these scary things?
What drove me was actually an unhealthy drive, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It was because my fear of not being enough and getting to the end of my life and wasting my life and being a nobody, that fear, which was birthed in insecurity, was so massive that it drove me more than fear of judgment.
Yeah.
It drove me the opposite way.
Cool. So the lesson we can get from that, I suppose, is to have a drive that is stronger than the fear. So have a why. And obviously yours is an example of an unhealthy why, but you've since done a lot of work on that and realigned your path. However, that would be kind of the crux of it. Just having like such a solid why that it's like we just stop buying into the excuses.
Yeah, the present moment solution that I'd offer to people is understanding the difference between your heart's desires, like the things that you really want to create in the world, and your head's attachments. And so, in other words, what are the things that you love about what you're pursuing versus the things that you're like attached to? So for example, if you are a nutritionist and you're trying to get nutrition clients and you need to do videos online to try to get some traction, but you're terrified of doing videos, and you connect into, okay, cool, what's my heart's desires here? What are the things that I'm really excited to bring in that feel really meaningful to me? I call this a heart map, by the way. So that would be, well, I'm really, I love helping people. Like I'm really excited to help people. I want people to feel, I want people to be pain-free. I want people to learn to love their body and have like beautiful, healthy, wholesome lives for themselves and their families. It would be that I just get a lot of fulfillment from being in a session with people. And I'm really excited to do that, to be in sessions with clients, like my nutrition, like I'm just pretending I'm you guys listening, with my nutrition clients. I want to be able to run retreats because I just love that immersive environment. And so these are all the things that if you were to tell somebody, what are your heart's desires, and you had to share them to somebody else, they'd really feel you. They'd be like, oh, wow. But then we got to understand that we have, as much as we have these like beautiful heart goals and heart desires and dreams and things that really light us up, we also have fears. And a lot of people don't have the courage to pinpoint and recognize the full truth of their fears, to understand what's actually blocking them.
Yeah.
Because, so I'll give you an example. So that was like sharing the heart desires, but what about the head attachments? Where you go, cool, if I was to do a video online, I'm terrified that my dad's going to say, I told you not to do your business. I told you you'd fail. Maybe that's one of the things I'm attached to, having my business work and not be proven wrong by my family. You know, that's not as healthy of a drive as to I really want to impact people's lives. So if you're in that thing of like, I can't have my dad turn around and say, I told you so. That's such a fear energy to be in. So if you're about to do your Facebook Live and that's present in the system, in your consciousness, versus, oh, I just want to touch people's lives and I want to help their family and them be really healthy and feel great in who they are, it's going to be so much easier to get that motivation to do that live because you're really connected to the meaning of your heart. And when you're in a state of love, it's impossible to be in a full state of fear at the same time. So that's really important. Some more examples of head attachments is like, I just need to make the money. I just really need to get sales in. What if I'm attached to people liking me? What if they think I look stupid? What if I forget what I'm saying on a live and everyone laughs at me? These are all attachments. I want people to like me. I want people to think I'm cool. I'm afraid they're going to think these are all fear-based perspectives on the same situation.
Yeah.
And so acknowledging that they're there, because some people, if I say, you're scared that you're going to look stupid, people go, I'm not scared. Because people are so afraid of even acknowledging the truth of what they're really afraid of.
Or
because
admitting
they don't want
that vulnerability.
Exactly, admitting that vulnerability. But I'm terrified of things all the time, every day. And I'm so happy to be honest about that, because I'm a human. No, everyone has them. I'm not under the illusion of that. But sometimes when we don't know that, because we're not in other people's heads, we don't know what's going on for them. But I'm telling you, everyone has things that are centered in their heart, and everyone has things that they're terrified of every day. And even if they look all confident and stuff, there'll be a bunch of things they're terrified of. People look really confident and good looking and well manicured, and they've got an amazing body. A lot of the time that's driven from a terrified that people are going to think they're ugly. But we don't, like, that's not written on their head on a post-it note just to inform you that everyone's human. So we have to like really learn that ourselves and use that as a way of like being, hey, it's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to have these fears and vulnerabilities. So if you can become aware of those and write them down and look at them, and then write down the actual deep meaning, then you've got a contrast of the full spectrum of what's going on in your internal world before you do that thing, before you take that leap of faith to do a Facebook Live, or say, oh, stuff it, I'm going to hire this social media expert to help me with my branding, or oh, I'm going to pay someone to do the website, or I'm actually going to go on this other podcast and I'm going to share my message with passion and speak from the heart. You know, these things are scary, but if you are reoriented back into your heart, then they're going to be so much easier. And that's a way healthier way to approach it. Because that thing that I had as well was planted in me from me being a little boy, and dad only spending time with me when he was helping me with like sport or performance of some kind and being really strict. So I'm like, oh, dad only loves me and wants to spend time with me when I'm doing good. So I have to do so good or else I'm not worthy of love. And then I've got my inner child inside this 22-year-old's body. I think I'm a 22-year-old taking action, but I'm a 5-year-old driving the steering wheel of the car of my life, going, oh, I've got to make sure daddy loves me. You got to make sure daddy loves me. Oh no, if I don't do these seminars, I'm a failure and I'm unlovable. And that's a pretty big drive, because as children, we think that if our parents don't love us, they're not going to protect us because we're dependent upon them for survival. So here I am as a full adult without knowing this at all, but afraid that I'm going to die because if I'm not doing good enough, my parents aren't going to love me and they're not going to protect me. But I'm a 22-year-old man. There's a 5-year-old calling the shots. And so not everyone has that programming. That programming was helpful for my business, but karma evened out over time. And I had huge karmic repercussions from driving the business growth from a place of fear. I had adrenal fatigue. I lost a bunch of money in the end and had like manifested some like really difficult, challenging situations in the business, like an executive that stole heaps of money, and just all these things unfolded. That wasn't karma, like, haha, karma's a bitch, like take that. It wasn't like I had bad intention, but if things are driven in fear, whether you're aware of it or not, it's going to have some karmic repercussions.
Wow. One thing I want to touch on there's many things I can touch on there, but one that really is standing out to me is when you were talking about the difference between doing things from your heart and wanting to show up because you feel really fulfilled when you're there helping people and their families, versus when the head and the fear is getting in the way of like, how will I look? It's a very stark contrast between others and us. Like I almost feel like being stuck in the fear, even though we're not doing it from bad intent, it's kind of like selfish in a way, because it's like, oh, what if I look stupid? But it's like, yeah, but we're also robbing that other person of the experience of receiving our help and being able to have that impact on them and their health and their family's health. So that's kind of one thing that sticks out to me when I do notice myself in those fear loops, or it's like, oh no, I can't go live. What if I slip over my words and sound silly, or can't do a podcast because, you know, I'm on my period and I know I don't talk as clearly when I'm on my period, or whatever stories it is. And then I just kind of like check myself and I'm like, but do I want to be here and be of service? Is that something that fulfills me? Is it something that I actually do want to do deep down underneath the fear, and make it less about us and more about the others that we're here to serve?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful observation, babe. And I feel like one really important way to view that is just having the awareness and understanding that anytime there's a fear that we have, it's always at the biggest picture as a fear of death. Because let's say, for example, it's a fear of judgment. we're afraid that we're going to look silly. That's because we're programmed as human beings, Homo sapiens, that for tens of thousands of years survived in tribes, that if you mess up in the tribe and you look stupid in the tribe and the tribe doesn't like you and you don't belong in the tribe, that you get ousted and you will die, because you need the whole tribe for survival. So even though we're afraid, and I always use this example with people, if I said to you guys, everyone that's listening, you right now have to go straight to your local shopping center, Coles, Woolworths, whatever it is, and you have to put on a bikini, or if you're a male-bodied person, a mankini, and you have to dance like crazy and sing at the top of your voice in that shopping center. You are not going to do it, probably, and you're going to, I forced you to do it, you're going to feel in your body like you're going to die, like you're going to freak out. You're not going to die, but you'd feel like you're going to die. And that's an exaggerated example of how, like, most of the fears that we have are a fear of judgment, which is a fear of rejection, which is a fear of abandonment, because abandonment in the tribe means death. You're not going to survive by yourself in the wild. So it's a big deal. And so every time we have a fear, if you understand, I like to personify my fear as being an inner child. So every time I'm afraid, I like to think of my inner child, like a 5-year-old version of myself is scared, because it just helps inspire compassion. And that's the message that I have for everyone that's listening. When you're afraid of something, which if you're not doing it, you are afraid, at the very biggest picture, you're afraid of death, and your inner child's really scared. So having an even more constructive way of perceiving what you said, it's like, it's kind of like selfish. Well, it is, because we go against our values when we need to meet our needs. If our needs are being jeopardized, if our need for safety and survival is being jeopardized, like if someone's about to get tortured, they're going to lie. They're going to say whatever they have to say to stay alive. And that's another exaggerated example of, if we're really scared, we lose our integrity. We don't care about impact. We're not, like, being scared is not a place for inspiration. It's not a state for impact and contribution, because there's self-preservation needed. And so having compassion and going, okay, I'm scared. Well, that's like, and you can kind of like support yourself. I'm sorry you're feeling scared. That's a difficult state to navigate. And therefore, like, I'm sending you a lot of love right now, inner child, and you aim a lot of love back at yourself. And then without that awareness of what's happening, then you can reorient yourself back to your heart and go, no, I do care about making a difference to people. I personally feel that everything that we do is ultimately still for ourselves. So if we're being really loving, and contribution feels great.
Yeah, it does.
It feels really awesome.
It's fulfilling.
It is so fulfilling.
Yeah.
And so we're doing it for ourselves ultimately as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think, like, the word selfish itself has more like shadowy connotations around it, but I actually think there is some beauty in being selfish too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, not saying it as like a bad thing, but it was just, it can sometimes help me get back into my heart by being like, this is like,
there's people counting on me right now.
Others. Yeah.
That's totally an inspiring perspective. And I just encourage people to go see that, well, there's other people that are counting on me right now, as part of what your heart's truest desires are towards doing that live. But also, like, I get to serve people. Like, I actually want to feel empowered, that there are some other drives as well that are more self-focused, so that there can be a balance there, not pendulum swinging. Between like service for others and it's keeping the orientation in our own hearts. Yeah,
totally. Because you're right, it can pendulum swing to the other side, where it's like we're only of service and we're ignoring our needs, because maybe we do need to have that day that we're just like, no, I just need a rest today. Like you said, give, receive, grow. So it's so important, once again, to come back to you, to come back to knowing what you need, and having that discernment.
Yeah. And I really love to preach this message of, like, just being real with things, because at the end of the day, we do everything for ourselves, but there's so much shame culture and political correctness. People just say things because they know that it sounds good, and that's like, people approve of. I actually serve because I want to be of service to other people. And I need to get out of my own way so I can actually be of service. And it's like, you're being of service for yourself. So let's get off our high horse here. You're not better than anyone else. You're not worse than anyone else. We're all equal, no matter what we say.
Yeah.
Like, let's stop shaming people and having this right, wrong narratives.
Yeah.
Like, everything we're all doing is the best we can do at the time. So if someone's like said something really angry, sure, we can hold them responsible and accountable for that. But you're not better than them because you see someone doing something that you disapprove of.
Yeah.
You know, and there's just such a culture of that. So I really like to stand for just truth. And truth is that we are all equal.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. All right. So are there any other like key lessons from that business before we go into what you would do differently now?
What was the one that I said?
We went on a big tangent, didn't we? It was, it's testing my memory.
The learning was so if you just, what was the original question? And I'll probably just say the same thing.
What was your like key learnings from growing that business and then choosing
it was that anything's possible. It's just like the first learning I had was that I realized that anytime you apply yourself to things, there's actually it's a lot easier to create things that you want in the world than what society just we emotionally and energetically believe.
Yeah.
Based on just idea. Business is hard. Well, anything is just obvious. Like if you wanted to design a car, you could do that. You could probably spend 20 hours researching all the different factors to designing a car, and you could probably design something using some computer programs and stuff within 20 hours of learning it. But if someone said to me, hey, can you design a car for my friend who like is looking for a new model to design for his car manufacturing company, I'd be like, I ain't designing the car. It'll take me 3 years. Like in my head, I would just go, it'll take 3-5 years. I could probably do it in 20 hours. But just like the idea that it's hard makes it so hard. My body doesn't even try.
Like even you saying that, I'm like, there's no way you could do that in 20 hours. Like,
I reckon I could.
Like,
yeah. But that's what I learned about business. So for example, I wrote a book and English was my worst subject at school, but I wrote a book and the way that I wrote it was I just like used my own common sense. I went, okay, well, how could I do this? And it's like, all right, well, what's the point? What's the main thing I want people to get from the book? And then I wrote a bunch of things down and then chose the best one. Okay, that's what I want people to get from a book. And then it's like, okay, what are all the things needed to get someone that result? And I did a massive brainstorm. These are every single thing I would teach people to get them that result. And then I went, okay, well, I'm going to group all these ideas that I wrote down. And then I grouped them and they became the chapters. And then under every one of those main chapters, I went, what's every single thing I'd have to teach someone to help them with one of the groups was marketing. And then what's every single marketing thing I'd possibly teach a coach? Because I wrote a book on help. It was called Secrets of the 7-Figure Coach, and it was how to build $1 million coaching business. And then I went, brainstormed it all out. And then I summarized grouped them all, and then they became the sub chapters. And then for each sub chapter, I went, well, what's the main point of this? What are all the things I would do for that? And I grouped them and they were the sections. And then every section, I went to every section of every sub chapter of every chapter of the whole book. And then I went, well, what's every story, example, statistic, diagram, graphic that I could use for this? And then and what's the real point that I want to get across for this section? And I planned that out for every section of every subchapter of every chapter. And then I had a whole book plan. And then I just made a rule with myself. Okay, I've got to write 1,000 words an hour. And then after 120 hours, I read 120,000 words. It was like a 420-page book that had heaps of visuals, stats. It was really engaging. And then I just wrote it, never went back and checked everything because I knew if I started trying to edit things, it was just going to take me forever. And so within 2 months, I'd wrote a 400-page book. And then I hired an English teacher for like a couple of grand to edit the whole book. And then I just went to a publishing company, like a printing company, and said, hey, do you print books? And they're like, yeah. And then I just just paid someone on Fiverr or something to edit. But if you told me like a few years before I'd kind of opened up to anything as possible, write a book, I'd be like, whoa, you can't just write a book. It was just like the sheer feeling behind it. But if you look at all those steps, no, you can't tell me that anyone that's listening to this is not the same level of intelligence to understand that if you want to get the most out of a chapter, you just got to understand all the things you want to put in that chapter, and then you can summarize them into sections. A 5-year-old could do that. So, but then as adults, we go, oh, you can't just write a book. And it's just the belief around it that blocks me. So I really, really understood this idea that, okay, I want to hire someone. Cool. Well, I don't know how to hire someone. And instead of saying that, I went, okay, well, what do I want to make sure? What are the qualities I want them to have? I want them to be really hardworking. I want them to be like really use a lot of initiative. I want them to be trustworthy. Okay, cool. Well, how could I test for that during the interviews? Okay, well, I could give them the opportunity to like sneak in something subtle to see if they notice they've made a mistake and whether they'll be honest about it. That'll prove whether they're trustworthy. Now, I didn't read a recruitment book to understand that. It's just common sense. I want to teach their competency. So I'm going to make them do something in the interview to show that they're competent at it. Cool. Yeah. Do an ad for me right now. I don't care about your resume. I want to know whether you're good at your job or not. You're going to show me. And I want to speak to the people that you've worked with before, and I want them to tell me directly the sort of projects that they did. And I'm going to test you with all the information that would prove that you know what you're talking about. But that's common sense. I didn't read a recruitment book. So the whole business was pretty much from a knowledge and wisdom perspective. I just used my own common sense, which I've had my whole life, and everyone has. But it was just up until that point where I broke through. It was my limiting beliefs and fears that blocked me from being able to access it. Yeah. Because when someone said, cool, you have to, like, if it was like, I'm going to put a gun, if anyone listening to this, I put a gun to your head and said, you're going to die if you do, and your whole family's going to die if you don't. You threatened my listeners. if you don't take your nutrition business to $100,000 in the next 12 months, everyone has the capability to do that. Yeah, they'd do anything and everything, and they'd easily do it. They probably do it in a month. But it's just the belief systems that block us. Yeah. So that was that's the biggest thing I want your listeners to get from that journey. Yeah, beliefs are huge. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So moving on to what would you do differently? Yeah. So if I had the opportunity to approach the journey again, I mentioned before, I was very marketing and sales focused because my goal was to break through financially, and I wanted to directly do that. I went, okay, well, how do I make money? Well, I've got a product at a certain price, and then it's like the most amount of sales. So it's like, let's say the product was $1,000, then what do I multiply it by $1,000? It's how many clients I have. So if I had 100 clients, I make 100,000. If I have 500, I make 500,000. We had a $20,000 program. We had 250 clients at a time. So that's 5 million. Is that right? 250. Yeah, times 20,000. Times 20. Yeah. Like $5 million a year. So it's like, cool. How do we get more? And then we'll work backwards from there. And so the whole focus was on like, how do I create an awesome product? How do I market and sell? But mainly, how do I market and sell? Now, one thing that I've noticed, because I had the luxury of working with coaches, which taught me a lot, because I got to witness a lot of small business owners and the way that they approach their journey and what happened with them with their mindset when they're put under pressure, and just seeing mums and young men, just like all different sorts of humans approach the journey, and what are the commonalities in their mindset and where do they buckle. And I noticed that a lot of people would shift their alignment in order to try to make it easier, like to try to get cash flow quicker. So a lot of people would come in and they go, I really, really want to like help people with work-life balance. And as soon as they see someone else in the same program get results quickly, helping business owners grow, their mission of helping people have work-life balance got traded in for what could they do to make the money quicker. But I think the reason that was the case was because they were afraid that they were never going to break through. So when I started my business, I thought I was never going to break through. And so I was really driving from insecurity. It wasn't like, yeah, it's a sure thing, I'm definitely going to make it. I was like, will I make it? This is such a big leap of faith. I'm so scared. But what's going to work? And then I tailored my journey based on what was going to work, and also what was going to get the best results, which means that I kind of disconnected from what was most authentic and aligned to me. And then ultimately, years and years down the line, I found myself have this whole entity, this whole organism, this business with all these staff and all these clients was built upon what was going to get the best financial results for me, not what was the most aligned.
Mm.
So eventually it reached a point where it was intolerable to continue to do the same thing, and it imploded anyway, because I was never doing it purely on what was most aligned for me.
Yeah.
I was doing it based on what worked. And I notice a lot of people do that. I've had the luxury of being around in the inner circle and networking groups that I've caught up with monthly for multiple years on end, of entrepreneurs doing over $8 million a year, between $8 and $150 million a year, and seeing all the nuances, the hardship, everything about these people's businesses, the hardest times, the best times. And most of them, they all did what was going to be most effective. Because when you get into business, the way that you measure the business results is based on a profit and loss statement. That's when you go to your accountant, you submit a profit and loss statement, which is essentially your income minus your expenses. What's left? If your income was 100,000 and your expenses were 120, then you have a loss of 20,000. If your income was 100,000 and your expenses were 80, you've got a profit of 20,000. And so you go to that, and every stakeholder in the business is geared towards that number being biggest, because then all the stakeholders benefit from that number being the biggest. Yeah. And so naturally businesses evolve into what's going to be most profitable. That's why you see big companies lose their kind of integrity as they get bigger, like Facebook, for example. We just want people to be more connected. Well, you're kind of disconnecting the world by having them addicted to technology. It's not really your initial mission that you set out for. I want to help connect the world. You've helped disconnect people from their hearts, from their truths. And this, with all the freedom, the freedom of speech being taken away, and shocking, but that's just what happens. It's just geared towards profit. Every big company ends up doing that. So bottom line is, biggest change that I would do is I would know that I can make things work in the most aligned way for me long term. And I would be a lot more patient on the timing of doing what I loved, because it only becomes problematic if you haven't broken through and got your nutrition business where you want it to be. It only becomes problematic, or you haven't secured the right nutrition job that you're hoping to get, if you're sitting there terrified that it's never going to happen. If you're like, well, if you knew it was 100% guaranteed for you to hit your goal in like a year's time, then you could just sit back and kind of enjoy the next year. But if you're sitting there going, what if it never happens? What if it never happens? I knew I shouldn't have done this. I'm not good enough. Dad told me I shouldn't have done this. And it's all like sitting in the fear that it's never going to happen, then of course you've got a lot to be afraid of. And it's very difficult to be patient. But when you know it's going to happen, and you know that you're going to create what your heart really wants, like, why are you doing it? I want to genuinely impact as many lives as I can. Cool. Well, as many lives as you can is you doing your best effort, and however many lives that impacts is impacting as many lives as you can. So you're ticking your goal. So what's the problem? Well, yeah, people get confused on this because they are afraid that it's not going to work. So if I had my time again, my recommendation to all the listeners here starting their businesses from scratch is to really consistently connect to you becoming as like impactful as possible with your mission. Like, look at your service as a nutritionist and just get your reps in. I think it's great from what I've heard from where you studied at Endeavour and the way that they do placement, or what do they call it?
Clinic? We had to do clinical practice.
Clinical practice. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's so good. That's not in the coaching space.
Yeah. So it's not in all nutrition degrees either. Some unis don't do it.
Yeah, cool. It might seem like, let's say someone's thinking of doing their study that's listening through a uni that doesn't have it, because you'll get your certificate faster and it's cheaper or whatever. It's so difficult to do things by yourself. If you're doing it at a university or a college that's making it mandatory, you just do it, just like your homework. Like if I said to you, you have to buy a maths textbook and you've got to like go through the chapters and do all these assessments by yourself, no one's going to do it. But when you have to do it, or you're going to get grounded, or you're going to fail your subject and you have to pass to get through school, you just do it.
Yeah, accountability is super powerful.
Yeah, it's that accountability.
Yeah. And
also, like, it's just so much easier to do in numbers. Like, things are so much easier to do in groups versus solo. So that's amazing. So I would suggest for people to really just trust that the finances are going to come through at the right time. Do things like at an affordable, fair price. If you're starting out and it's like a fair price to charge people $70,